Yeah.
Welcome to Hispanic Speak Out TV, brought to you on Spectrum Cable every single week at 9:30 p.m. on Friday nights. We are here having an interview with Congressman Darren Soto, and we're going to be discussing with him information that we may or may not have, since we have direct access to the Congressman, of what's going on in Washington and what's going on locally. Hello, Congressman. How are you today?
Danny, thanks for having me on the show. It's a busy time and obviously a concerning time for millions of Americans with the coronavirus pandemic going throughout both our country and the world.
I have a series of maybe 5 or 6 questions that I'd like you to see if you can answer them the best way you can. There's a package going through right now in the Congress and the Senate, and there's a lot of information that this package is being held up. Why is it being held up, and who is holding it up?
So there's a negotiation between the Republicans and the Democrats in both the House and the Senate. Right now, there is a very controversial $500 billion slush fund that the Senate Republicans are trying to add in that would have no restrictions and give Secretary Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, unbridled authority to hand out the money to whoever he wanted to. We are all about making sure that this money is going to go to the workers and to make sure that we are helping out payrolls, and we want restrictions in it for no executive bonuses, no stock buybacks, all these different abuses that happened during the Great Recession when we had the Reinvestment Act dollars and the bailout dollars from last time. We've learned from history, and that's the key negotiation right now. The House Democrats will be releasing their bill today, which will be very similar, other than that one part. But let's go over all the parts of it because I think it'll be helpful. So in addition to 500, it's a nearly $2 trillion package, $1.6 trillion in direct aid, and then the rest through the Federal Reserve. There'll be a $500 billion package to help out major businesses, and we're razor focused, as we just discussed, on helping out with payroll. There's a $350 billion package to help out small businesses, which would directly go to assist with payroll. The key is we want people to keep their jobs. We want employers to keep people employed. Third, there will be direct assistance to individuals, $1,200 checks to individuals making $75,000 or less, and it'll go up to a smaller amount until you make about $99,000 a year, and then after that you'd be ineligible. In addition, there are funds to help stabilize our frontline healthcare workers, boost our hospitals and personal protective equipment, make sure that we have more tests out there. And in addition, we need to cover the American people. We need to make sure that now that we've made tests free, that we have now coverage free, the treatment free, and make sure that once there is a vaccine, that could be free as well. So those are some of the big parts to the bill and what's being negotiated as we speak.
How is that money? What is the process of that money flowing down to small business? Where do they go? Do they go to a bank and apply for a regular loan? Are there any special criteria, any relaxed regulations for giving out this money? What is that process?
It would primarily be distributed through your existing lender as a small business, especially if you have a line of credit already, or just the bank that you work with. Otherwise, others may be able to go directly through the Small Business Administration, the SBA, and the money will be directly for helping out with payroll. And right now we're fighting over whether it'll be just direct grants that don't need to be repaid or whether it be no interest loans. We want to make it as simple as possible, but most small businesses would be going through their existing lender to get this funding.
How do you, and I don't know what the criteria is for identifying what kind of businesses would get the grants or the loans. Obviously, a lot of these small businesses are qualified to get loans anyway. But the problem is that the cash flow issue. The cash flow for small businesses, a lot of Hispanic, and that's my major concern because I operate in the Hispanic community, are concerned about rents, they're concerned about electric bills, and they're concerned about water bills. They could make it through if they had those things covered. You know, they could probably make it through. I know a business, small business, that had 4 employees in Kissimmee that had to close its doors 3 days ago because it's a close contact business. So they haven't gotten any money from revenues for about 2.5 weeks. So they are desperate right now because it's a week to week. You know, and I know a lot of small businesses, they go on a 2-week cycle for money, you know. So how can those businesses be identified through a banking system who's going to ask them to apply for a loan and fill out all this paperwork?
So first, I've been a small business owner for 15 years while I was a lawyer and a part-time legislator and had to make a payroll twice a month. I know exactly what all these small business owners are going through, having gone through the Great Recession. And I know that every payroll, even in a good economy, is a leap of faith and a lot of hard work. And so we're going to make sure that whether it's through the SBA or through your existing lenders, that there wouldn't be major paperwork to fill out other than showing existing payroll records to show that these are folks who you had on the rolls and how you're unable to pay right now. There shouldn't be a lot of proof about you being unable to pay. That's where the paperwork really needs to be streamlined. And the payroll information we already have, because that's going to the federal government, the IRS. But the text of this is still being drafted right now. So
Okay.
there's been a concern about making this streamlined. And once the text is released in the House, we'll have a better idea. But most of the time, the regulations come from the agencies, not from the Congress. We usually put out something pretty straightforward that there shall be a $350 billion fund to be implemented by the Small Business Administration to help out with payroll expenses. Now, what is being negotiated right now is whether or not to apply to certain other things and what the terms of those would be. The biggest push will be to help payroll. And we figure if we can help people with payroll, that may assist them with some of their other costs. But I also encourage small businesses to work with their landlords and with their local utilities. I've already led a letter asking for no utility shutoffs during the 60-day national crisis and potentially for beyond. And while this isn't public till this interview, I'm also leading a letter that's going out by tomorrow that will call for no evictions or foreclosures meetings during this period of time. HUD's already made this declaration for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So I encourage local small businesses to work with their landlords. We're trying to make sure that no one gets utilities shut off, no one gets evicted during this time period. And as we come out of this, that will be additional relief to help those businesses.
You know, it's a domino effect because you can talk to a landlord, but the landlord still has to pay his mortgage on the building, especially in small business, like in an area like Main Street in Kissimmee. Those buildings, the people who rent those storefronts in those buildings are paying to a landlord. The landlord is paying the mortgage. So it's at the bank. If we can get a freeze for 2 months or 3 months on payments to mortgages, that would be the bottom line on helping small business. Also on electric and also on water bills for the common guy. You know, cell bills also is extremely important. I called T-Mobile, so you know, and they gave an extension of 2 months to pay. At least they told me, hey, you can pay us at the end of May. You know, so they gave me a 2-month extension. That's not law. I think that's just smart business so that they don't lose accounts.
So we've also had contact with the FCC where I led a third letter. Just so happens I happen to have led letters on all these things for our delegation.
Yeah.
Because I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we have telecommunications under our committee, energy, utilities under our committee, that we sent a letter to the FCC. They've already said they're not going to allow internet shutoffs during the national crisis. We pushed them to include cell phones. So what it comes down to, and so many of our small business owners are smart, they understand negotiations. So what we're trying to do is stop the big stuff, like cell phones being turned off, utilities being turned off, and internet being turned off, evictions and foreclosure stopping. But they're still going to have to negotiate some of these things, and we're going to need to get them funding to help out at least their payroll. And some of these things are going to have to be negotiated over the long term. And we're not going to be done with this after this big package. There will be other legislation, and we may have to look at working with our local utilities for repayment plans, working with our local cell phones. But the Congress isn't going to stop working after this package coming up. So those are issues we'll continue to to focus on as we go forward. But for right now, we need to make sure we could stop the huge firings going on and make sure to beef up unemployment benefits for those who already have been terminated. As you may know, Florida only gives you $275 per week in unemployment. It's the fifth lowest in the nation the last time I checked. And we're asking for, when the state gets additional funds, that they increase that, because no Floridian can live on $275 a week with the current expenses.
Mhm. What about people, and you know this too because you've had your experience as a small business person, what about people who file 1099s, who
So
are self-employed and they file 1099s and they are not, what is the definition of their support? And there's a
so
lot of small businesses that way.
So we're going to be including 1099 workers, the gig economy in general, Uber drivers, folks who work for Lyft and Shift and all these other companies as independent contractors. They are going to be included in this new package. We know that the economy has evolved, yet for years we've had opposition on the other side of the aisle in expanding benefits to these individuals. Now, many of them, they're required to pay payroll taxes in their own filings, and that's been a challenge sometimes. So that also is going to have to be streamlined eventually, that folks who are 1099 workers, we have a better process for them to be able to pay their payroll taxes, because a lot of folks think they don't owe payroll taxes when they're a 1099 employee, but they still do. They owe them personally. And that's how we fund the unemployment insurance. So that's why it's going to be key going forward, not only that we include them, but we make it easier for 1099 employees to be able to contribute to the system.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who are individuals who file 1099s and income tax at the end of the year in one shot. You know, they pay their taxes at the end of the year and they work as a 1099. And there's a lot of minority businesses that operate that way. So
Sure.
any hope that you could put out there and include that and make sure that they're not a forgotten group, because they're suffering just as much as anybody else.
Sure.
My next question to you is seniors. We have a tremendous amount of seniors. I have my own philosophy about seniors and how the country should reciprocate them for all their service in the past, being a senior.
Sure.
What happens with seniors now who are receiving a Social Security check, but that's certainly not enough to keep them going, because, you know, those Social Security checks aren't enough to maintain a standard. So they do little odd jobs and stuff and in order to survive. What do you, is this bill doing anything for seniors to identify them and to help them?
Sure. First of all, we, in the first of the three packages, two of which have passed already, we waived telehealth rules to allow for telehealth for our seniors, so that they can get their Medicare healthcare services even over the phone or through video conferencing, to help them in not having to go out during this coronavirus. And we've made sure that Medicare will cover anything related to coronavirus without requiring additional payments from seniors. In addition, there have been ideas batted around about including increased Social Security payments. Those have not been firmly put in there yet, but seniors would be eligible for the $1,200 check, since the vast majority of seniors on Social Security are not making $75,000 a year. And as I said, for those making under $100,000 a year, they'll still get a check, just a smaller one. And then those making $100,000 or more individuals would not be eligible. So
Yeah.
for seniors, they would be getting the individual check, much like any other American making under 100,000 or under 75 for the full check.
Would that be included as part of their Social Security check and go to them that way, or is it a different system?
It would be a separate check sent by the Treasury, and it would happen in April. And we're looking at, obviously, how long this crisis lasts. So if we find ourselves still in May with the same situation, we could see another round of checks going out to individuals who meet those two basic criteria of either being under 75,000, getting the full 1,200, or making up to $99,000 a year and getting a smaller check. And there's a sliding scale for that. But obviously, according to the legislation that stands, anyone making $100,000 or more would not receive a check. And I think that's appropriate.
Are these checks that are being sent out a one-time check, or are they being looked at as being a repetitive check depending on how this thing is going to last?
Look how good I am. I just answered your question before you even got to it.
Okay.
Yes, they will be, for right now, it's for April, but there will be triggers that are likely going to be added into the legislation that if we're still in a national emergency in May, that there'd be another round.
Okay. And if it goes to June, it'll be reconsidered again.
Right. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, so we want to be careful, but we also want to make sure that we are doing everything we can in this unprecedented crisis.
Yeah. I remember back during the last crisis, there were a lot of business executives, like a lot of people that I speak to are very, very negative about giving these undefined bailouts to airlines. You know, I had this gentleman tell me, well, they were charging me $25 for extra for a bag, and now they're asking for a bailout. How come these airlines can't sustain themselves over 2 months, and they expect citizens to sustain themselves, you know, primarily over that period of time?
Well, Danny, you just encapsulated the reason why House Democrats blocked the Senate bill last night, because they weren't going to give any restrictions. It was going to be a slush fund for the richest Americans and for the largest companies in the United States. And we said no. We said there has to be funding going directly to workers. They can't now raise prices. They can't now use this money for executive bonuses or share buybacks for shareholders.
So
That's
you're
fought last night, because that's what happened during the Great Recession, and there were no restrictions put on the Senate bill last night. And so we stood strong, and the House is going to put forward a bill with an equal amount, but with these kind of restrictions in place, because we cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. The bailout for the rich was a disgrace. What we saw in the last recession is that Wall Street got bonuses and Main Street got foreclosed upon, and we're not going to let that happen again.
I remember that. I remember AIG and a bunch of other corporations giving themselves bonuses out of the money that the government gave them, which was actually money that belonged to the people because it came out of tax money originally.
It's disgraceful, and now you know why we're fighting. However, I suspect we'll get a solution this week, probably maybe as early as Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, and we'll bring it in for a landing. But now you know the debate. This is the last part of the bill that we're all debating right now, to make sure we don't have the corporate 1% excesses of the bailout that happened during the Great Recession, and that we're prioritizing workers, homeowners, the middle class, working families across this nation. After all, we're all taxpayers at some point in our lives, and this needs to be equitably done. And I want to thank you for having me on the show, Danny.
Yeah, I would like to see if we can do something once a week at least, that you might be able to set up with your staff so that we can continue to get out. Like this bill is going to be going through shortly, to give an update on that. And so that the community really needs updates, particularly not only the community in general, because these bills are affecting everybody, but particularly the Hispanic community and the minorities are particularly vulnerable because they don't have the money. Usually, and you know, I'm being practical when I say this. They don't have the kind of money to be able to go through something like this for 3 months without having any additional funds and without working. They just can't survive. So we need the support.
I've knocked on thousands of doors throughout this district, and I'm keenly aware of the many challenges facing our constituents right now. And I encourage people to go to www.soto.house.gov. We have information on all these resources and more in English, Spanish, and in any other language Google can translate
Good.
for. And we also are giving daily updates on our Facebook page, repdarrensoto.com, or Rep Darren Soto at Facebook, on my Twitter feed. And Danny, I'd encourage you to also look at those things and help rebroadcast them. And we'll do our best to make a commitment to get on as best we can, accommodate you potentially.
Yeah, if you can accommodate me just once a week, that'd be fine. And we'll hit your website and your Facebook page, and then we'll rebroadcast.
Yeah, I mean, I would just get on there and rebroadcast it.
Okay.
You'll see information by the day. And with
Okay.
that, my friend. Have a great day.
All right, thanks, Darren. We'll talk again.